à-bas-le-ciel.
I was actually married for 20 years, and was faithful for 17.
Okay.
And then had a few like one night stands and started to realize it took me a while to realize that actually I probably shouldn't be doing monogamy, particularly given certain aspects of my marriage, which I keep private. But there were additional reasons to this, and so eventually, yeah, I did confess to my wife, like, look, I've had some affairs, and I just don't
Was it
think.
with Mount Delahunty?
What? No. What?
No, I'm just curious because I just thought, fuck, I would never. You know what I mean? Not him.
Oh. No, I have no idea what you're talking about there. But no, and as I just said, like, I understand if you want to get a divorce, because I can't do monogamy in this relationship. And she said, well, let's try an open marriage for a while and see if that works. And so we did. We did that for 2 years, and it just wasn't for her. That wasn't the thing for her. But it was. So basically, that's when we decided to get a divorce, and we had an amicable divorce. We only needed a divorce facilitator. We didn't even need lawyers because we all agreed on everything, and so we were fine about that. But and then, once we were divorced, this was the beginning of 2015. Then I could publicly declare openly that I'm non-monogamous. I'm ethically non-monogamous, polyamorous. I'm not going back. And so then I could be much more open and honest, and not have to ever be in that situation again.
Carrier was quite open about advertising for sexual partners on his blog. When he announced that he was going off to a speaking engagement, he'd also request people to write back to him for an evening of intimacy. I winced a little bit when I saw it, but it was okay. It was entirely consensual. So we had no complaint, and we're really not interested in policing all content on Freethought blogs. But then we saw another problem. He was showing up in the comment sections of other people's blogs and prattling on about his sexual activities. It was a bit obnoxious, but he'd stop when requested, so there was nothing actionable about it. And then he was dropped from the Secular Student Alliance's Speakers Bureau for breaking a rule. And that rule was, speakers must refrain from initiating any and all sexual behavior with students with respect to Speakers Bureau events. He was hitting on students, a behavior that was witnessed and to which he freely admitted. He insisted that he never violated the student's consent, which he thought was sufficient, but he was defying the SSA's rules. And then the final straw. He was banned from a major conference for his repeated boundary-pushing behavior. This was a thoroughly believable accusation because we'd already seen signs of it.
It's a well-known fact of me now that I'm an outspoken polyamorous man, and have been for 3 years now.
So when you do the debates or talks, do you ever look at the crowd and do what Van Halen did in their heyday and talk to somebody and say, I like the chick, row 7, talk to...
No.
No. I would,
I don't, that's not interesting. I don't find that, if I'm going to pursue someone, it's got to be more with interaction. Like, I got to know something about them, right, and feel a chemistry with them. I can't just pick someone visually and say, yeah, that person. That doesn't really work.
Right. Yeah. Well, I guess that's where we differ. So.
Well, granted, I have a lot more experience with a non-monogamous lifestyle, so I know the difference between good sex and bad sex with lots of different people. Mostly good sex. So I know that Van Halen style of pursuing sex is not actually, it's not as much rewarding as you might think it is.
You have got to read some of his sworn testament. Like we were just having this casual conversation and suddenly Dick decides that what that conversation needs at that point was for the rest of the world to know that he had so much more sexual stamina since he had his vasectomy. Yeah, polite, civilized conversation. Who wouldn't think of saying something like that? Or propositioning somebody else's wife while their husband was passed out in the next room. Meanwhile, in Carrier's sworn deposition, a polyamorous love letter. God, you gotta feel cringe in this. Okay, so this time I'm just saying fuck it and bearing my heart to you and being a little overly frank and forthcoming and just flat out hitting on you. You are unequivocally awesome and you know it, which is unequivocally sexy. Although I am a little sexually intimidated by you, which only makes me more nervous. I don't mean as a life partner. I think you have your hands full there anyway, and my wife's rules on our open relationship, I'm not allowed to have any more of those right now. But as a sexual partner, even if just once, I admire you immensely. Your bravado, your power, your honesty, your intelligence, your character. Your skill as a writer, and for me, admiring a woman is an enormous turn-on. Competence is erotic. And sharing sexual experiences with an incredible woman like you is so what I want out of life. After reading his sworn deposition, I wouldn't trust him alone with a vacuum cleaner. Oh, and just to fill you in on how completely incestuous this whole thing was, Richard Carrier was dating the married head of Camp Quest, who it turns out was married to the head of the Secular Student Alliance, and despite being married to each other, they insisted that there was no connection between Camp Quest and the Secular Student Alliance. Another great star of the atheist social justice warrior conference circuit, who was given some $10,000 to write a book on Islam, which still hasn't been produced for years after the due date. And this is, of course, from Dick's polyamorous love letter. You just radiate agency, and that's like a brilliant warm light you just want to embrace and experience passionately. I can go on admiring you from afar as a writer, as an activist, a colleague, and a valuable asset to our movement. I can go on spending excellent time together with you as a friend when we happen to be around each other. I won't be badly dejected by a no, but if there's any chance you want me, I'm hoping to know. And of course, she calls it immediately and blows him out the water. How can I say this? You must have mistaken me for someone who is impressed by multiple accounts of multiple conquests and thinks "Are you down to fuck" email is a love letter. And after pages of exchanged emails, she actually just lays it down on the line. You've been heavily hinting at this for months now. If you want to feel awful for the months of me wanting to tell you no, but not being asked in a direct enough way for me to just say no and get it over with. You already had published how you cheated on your wife multiple times, in some cases with a girl 16 years younger than you, who we now find was no less than the conference organizer, who we now know you were writing a favourable reference for in exchange for certain favours.
Well, have you ever had sex with somebody and halfway through it you just thought, this sucks, and just get up and leave? No, fuck it.
No, I've been polite and stuck through it. Very rarely. I mean, very rarely does that ever happen where I realize, you know what, we don't have chemistry. This isn't that great. But no, if you do it, you're going to be polite to the person. You're not going to just like up and leave. Having the freedom to be honest about my relationships and my desires and things like that, not have to conceal them, not have to pretend they don't exist, not have to lie to anyone. Like this is the way to live.
Now that you became famous, you've kicked your wife to the curb, and then this is what what it said, and
what I in hindsight, like if I knew then what I know now, of course I was naive then, but if I knew more about the acceptability of just admitting that you want to be non-monogamous, I would have done that first, right, rather than cheated. But I just didn't understand that about myself, and I wasn't fully in a place of understanding that was an option at the time. So it would have been better, and this is what I recommend to people who are in the same place as me, is if you want to do that, if you are unhappy because of your forced monogamy, the situation you're in, you should be honest. Or if you think you're going to cheat, for example, you should just be honest and say, look, I just can't do monogamy anymore. And what does that mean for us? Does that mean we break up? Does that mean we have an open relationship? And just explore that honestly with your partner. I think that's the best way to go. But it's never easy because, you could think like that's going to nuke your marriage and that's going to transform your life. And so it's difficult. There's no simple, easy solution in those circumstances. There's going to be some amount of unhappiness no matter which decision you make. And it's just a question of which unhappiness lasts longer or is worse than all of the options.
À-bas-le-ciel.
Okay, so inappropriately glib way to start this recording. Look, I was just saying to my girlfriend off camera, there's no point in me putting up a quotation from the Pope, or what will be even more extreme, the leader of ISIS, or some Muslim fundamentalist group, and me just sitting here and blanket condemning, or harshly that kind of critique. I just don't. Where the gap between me and the person I'm criticizing is so broad or so deep or so wide that it doesn't really matter what in particular I say. What's challenging for me, and maybe challenging for some people in the audience, is for me to talk about and interact with people where the degrees of difference are harder to measure out. And of course, that's what I did within veganism on this channel for years and years and years, right? If I got back involved with Buddhist intellectual cross currents, that would be the same too, where I'd be talking about other Buddhist intellectuals and criticizing them, or politics of Taiwan or something. So I'm going to just say I do this as a challenge, and it is a little bit challenging for me. Okay, so I'm divorced. Back when I was married, my ex-wife and I this was kind of a recurring thing we'd talk about. It was like, nobody wants to separate work and pleasure. So we knew this one couple, and the guy was a professor, and what do you know? Who did he cheat on his wife with? He didn't want to walk 3 blocks to have an affair. He cheated on his wife with his secretary. And at that particular university, the secretaries, like, this is my experience, but other people the secretaries were never like professional secretaries. So again, some people actually go to school and study how to be a secretary. It really seemed like everyone who was in the position of secretary was just kind of a friend of somebody. It was more like hiring a babysitter. The way at that university, what we saw was, obviously I'm being a little bit vague. So, and of course his secretary was a younger woman, and whereas he did have kids with his wife and so on and so forth. And when we knew this other couple, and we knew them during their breakup, and the guy cheated on his wife, and who did he cheat with? Did he want to have to take a bus trip or buy an airplane ticket? No, he was also a professor. I don't know if he had the title of full professor, or because there's lecturer, but he was on the professor side of things, and it was a student. It was one of his students, and she was. I mean, she wasn't it wasn't her age that was shockingly low. However, there is this, ethical code you signed up for. It's actually in the contract and so on. She was old enough to consent, and evidently she did consent, but that is decidedly not the point, apart from, cheating on your wife. Now, what this example gets us into is a broader question. Let's say you're part of a movement. Let's say you're part of a political movement, not a professor in a university, but you're a leader of public opinion, or a discussant, or you're a Socratic figure. You're a gadfly who engages people in conversations and discussions, which is, a large part of what Richard Carrier does. He's part of this secular atheist, political movement. Who does he want to have relationships with, hook up with, and so on and so forth? He's not walking real far out of his way. It's the people who are coming to his talks, people who come to his lectures, the people who are part of that scene. And it's a disaster. And what can I tell you? Honestly, I'm sitting here watching this, and even some of it, if you described it in broad brushstrokes in the abstract, it might not sound that bad. No, it's really poisonous and destructive and corrosive. And you can see that. There was a brief moment as I've edited this where it gives you a diagram of the different people inside the organizations at different levels, and he's connected to them, with his personal life or his sex life and so on. No, it's again, whether it's a workplace or a political movement, I think it's really hard for people to face up to how corrosive that is. And then what's the solution? And what are you just going to say? Like, oh, well, don't separate business and pleasure, separate your work. That's not what anyone wants to do. Because actually, Carrier just said it towards the end there, in a human and sympathetic way. He said, no, he doesn't want to have relationships with random people just because they're good looking. He wants to connect with people he has something meaningful in common with. Those are my words, not his. He did not explain it that well. And who does he have those meaningful connections with? Who does he feel that chemistry with, as he put it? It's exactly people inside these sorts of difficult and delicate political and social situations. Yeah, so I make this video because it's not easy for me to harshly condemn this one or another. My girlfriend was just saying, you'd get along really well with this guy. You guys could be friends. You don't even know. He used to be a Taoist. He actually lost faith in Taoism and then became a critic of Christianity. I used to be a Buddhist. Now I'm a historical nihilist. It's true, though, he has an approach to history and politics, and I have been influenced by his work more than 5 years ago, I think, or about 5 years ago now. Is when I was really interested in his writing and his lectures on YouTube and so on. And I'm a little bit shocked now. I just Googled him a couple days ago to see what I've been missing in the last 5 years in terms of what happened in his life. But yeah, it's a cautionary tale. And I close with this note. It's easy. It's too easy for people to say monogamy isn't for everyone. It's actually a lot more challenging to say open relationships are not for everyone. I mean, what is that? Everyone knows monogamy fails, whether it's 60% of the time or what. I mean, a lot of monogamous relationships end in divorce. What does it even mean for non-monogamy to fail? And Richard Carrier, he thinks his life is great. He thinks he seems totally satisfied and quite proud. And I'm sitting here watching this thinking, this is a disaster. I'm sitting here watching this thinking, look, bro, you're not cut out for this. You're not cut out for this lifestyle that you propound and, that you're basically an activist for at this point. And he doesn't see it that way. And of course, a lot of things in life are like that. I mean, there is no driver's license for being a parent. We know a lot of couples like this. We know people that choose to be a parent, and it's like, choose again. You are not cut out for being a parent. Nobody's going to tell them that. And they're, oh, good for you. Yeah. No one. There's no driver's license. There's no blood test. There's no eyesight test. There's no, being a parent is not even like joining the army, and the barrier to joining the army is not that high. If you can do 200 push-ups, you can get in. Anyway, people choose themselves to be a parent. People choose themselves to be a political activist, to get involved with charity, nonprofit sector. People choose themselves to get involved in non-monogamy and to play these games and to set up these situations. And who is likely to make that choice? Maybe disproportionately, it's the people who are least able to handle the consequences of that choice and who are the most lacking in the necessary tact, detachment. Maybe it's going to disproportionately be people who are not equipped to live that life, who are going to choose to live that life. Okay, guys, those are my thoughts on Richard Carrier.